Hey everybody, welcome to the Green Room for My Inner Abbey episode 1. Green Room is basically just getting things set up. People can come in a little bit early, and I like to make sure that everybody can hear me and that the chat's working and everything like that. So if you can hear me, if you could just type in the chat to the right of the video, if you're on the URL that I sent out by email, if you just type in that you can hear me okay, I would appreciate that. And I'm just going to finish getting set up here, and we'll get started in about 9 minutes. Okay, welcome again to all my live viewers. We're going to get started in just a minute here, and thank you for those of you who let me know that you can actually hear me. Just to let you know, if you're coming here live, I'm trying out a couple of different formats for the live program, and this is probably going to be my least favorite one. Next time we'll try a different one, and we'll just see how they go. So since this is the first episode, this is a little bit of experimentation here. So just to let you all know that. Also, it looks like we only have a few people that showed up for the live program, which I guess is to be expected for the first time. I want to encourage you, if you can encourage other people to come live, obviously that's going to help our discussions and our chats a lot more if we can get more people here. So I'm going to put the all right, if you guys were hearing that, I apologize. Something strange with the Google Hangouts, but there we go, I got it figured out. All right, so we're going to get started, and there is a delay, so if you see me pause once in a while, especially after asking you a question, and asking you to put it in the chat, that's what I'm doing, is waiting for that delay to come across. So, all right. Hey everyone, this is Jeff Arrowwood. I'm the founder of the Catholic Educational Apostolate from the Abbey, and this is the first episode of a new webcast called My Inner Abbey. And in this episode, we are going to, first of all, just talk about what this webcast is going to be all about, give you kind of an orientation to the webcast. And we're going to then take a look at a question that I received after I put out an appeal for questions on Facebook, answering a question about heaven and whether it matters what religion we follow to get there. And then we're going to talk about why this answer is so key to spiritual growth and to what we're doing here with the My Inner Abbey webcast. And then I have a book review for you, just a quick introduction to a resource that I think you'll find fun and interesting. And we'll talk about where we're going to go from here. So that's all we're going to do for the first episode. And to start off, you're probably wondering what a webcast is. I've been calling this a webcast. Well, some of you are here live, and you are seeing this as a Google Hangout. Some of you are watching this on a video on YouTube, or listening to it on a podcast. And some of you may even be reading the transcript of this. A webcast is simply something that's transmitted in all of those forms, so that people can pick it up in the best way for them. Now, this webcast is going to be available now live for those of you who are here, and also as a rebroadcast. And again, if you have signed up at myinnerAbbey.com, I will be sending an email when those rebroadcasts are available. And those will be available both in the totality of this evening, but also in segments. So if you just want to watch one of the segments, you could do that. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you, for those of you who are not familiar with me. Some of you are friends and family, some of you have been with me for a long time, have heard me give live talks, but some of you are actually here because you've picked up one of my articles and got invited to this, this program. And you may not have a full understanding of what From the Abbey is all about. And also to introduce to all of you the idea of My Inner Abbey. My Inner Abbey is going to be about taking practical steps and creating usable strategies to grow as disciples of Jesus Christ. And actually, that's going to be my main focus for the entire From the Abbey program. I'm going to be talking about really focusing on very practical theology, very practical steps that we can take to increase our relationship. From the Abbey and My Inner Abbey are both based on a metaphor of rebuilding your inner Abbey. And in this metaphor, the Abbey is the part of our hearts where we can retreat from the distractions of the world and we can really focus on our relationship with Jesus. And of course, the challenge is that our inner Abbey is torn apart by sin and by distraction. And we really need to open up all of the rooms, to clean them out, to repair them, and to make our hearts really a good place to meet Jesus. And in the metaphor, each of these rooms that you see in this image stands for a different area of spirituality that many of us as Catholics and maybe even as non-Catholic Christians neglect, but that the saints and the spiritual masters all tell us that we really need to nurture if we want to deepen our relationship with Jesus. So from the Abbey and My Inner Abbey are both going to use that metaphor of rebuilding this inner Abbey. From the Abbey, again, is the name of my apostolate in general, and My Inner Abbey is the name of the specific webcast. The inner Abbey, as I said, is torn apart by sin and distractions of the world. Sorry. I'll get better at this as we go. So each visit of My Inner Abbey, as the webcast, is going to visit one or two of the rooms of our inner Abbey. And we're going to talk about specific strategies in that specific area of spirituality to help us to grow in our relationship with Jesus. But first, we're always going to check in with you and see what questions you have asked and what feedback you have for us. And so as we go through our metaphor, follow through with our metaphor on the inner Abbey, we're going to call each of these segments, name each of these segments after one of the rooms of the inner Abbey. So this is the public courtyard. Public courtyard is where we go out to meet people. And actually in the schema from the Abbey, the public courtyard is going to be the last thing that you would learn about. But in our My Inner Abbey webcast, it's going to be the first thing that we do. We're going to talk about, go out into the public courtyard, and we're going to talk with you and see what your questions are, see what your feedback is. And if you want to ask questions and leave feedback, there are a few ways that you can do that. The first place that you can do that is on Facebook. And the From the Abbey Facebook page is what we're going to use there, facebook.com/From the Abbey. If you are not a Facebook person or would rather do it on Google+, you can go to the Google+ community and just search in the communities for My Inner Abbey. And I'm the only one that comes up. So you can put in a request to join that community as well. If you prefer to just email the questions, you can do that at jeff@fromtheabbey.com. Jeff, Jeff, @fromtheabbey.com. And you can email that as well. But I do hope that you will join us for these social media as well, the Facebook and the Google community. You only need to really be a member of one of those. I'll be asking the same questions in each of those groups. But if you're really interested in it, you might, of course, want to join both of them, because then you get the experience of having a greater community answering the questions, and you'll get more of those more responses to respond to. So as I said, I put out a request on Facebook. Obviously, this is the first episode, so I haven't been able to ask you to ask questions. But I did put out a general call for questions. And I don't know if Mia is here with us today, but this question comes from Mia. And she wrote, "I'm surrounded by loving and caring people from different religious backgrounds. I constantly find myself wondering if it really matters what religion I belong to, as long as I'm doing good. I have many people that I love who do not believe in God, but continue to do good. So will we all find ourselves in heaven as long as we are good people?" Now, the reason I chose this question for our first episode is that the answer to this question is really core to what My Inner Abbey is all about. So before I answer the question, I want to give those of you who are attending here live a chance to answer this question. So if you would put your answers in the chat to the right of the video, if you are at the URL that I sent you by email, just answer the question, how do you understand heaven? So what is your definition of heaven? What if somebody came up and asked you, what does a Catholic believe about heaven? What would you answer? And I'm going to pause here while that question comes through, because there is a lag in the Google Plus. So I'll have to wait for the answers to appear on my screen. Okay, so if we're going to understand what heaven is, the first thing we really need to get a grasp of is what heaven is not. A lot of times it's easier to understand what something is not than it is to understand what something is. But this is especially true in answering this particular question, because there are a lot of misconceptions about heaven that we want to clear up tonight and make sure that when we have our eye on the prize, when we have the goal in mind that we're all here for, that we know exactly what that goal is, that we're not falling into any of the traps that our culture lays for us, misunderstandings of what heaven's all about. The first thing that I want to make sure that you understand is that heaven is not a reward for doing good. And a lot of times when people ask a question like this, asking, will so-and-so be in heaven, or can we get to heaven this way or that way, we're really asking, we're really seeing heaven as a reward for doing good. If I'm just good enough, I'll be rewarded by God, and He'll give me this place of paradise where we can get to heaven. Now, where does this view of heaven come from? It actually comes from the influence of paganism on Catholicism. And we see this way back in the early church, obviously with the Greeks and the Romans having their view of the Elysian fields, for example, as a place of rest and paradise for those who are good and virtuous. That really is kind of the idea that seeped into Christianity and Catholicism. But the problem, of course, is that that's not how Jesus defines heaven. It's not how the Bible defines heaven. Heaven is so we don't want a pagan idea of what heaven is. We don't want to think of it just as a reward for doing good. The other thing that we want to understand is that when we talk about heaven, it's not primarily paradise. And this is very closely tied to the first thing that heaven is not, if it's not a reward for doing good. We will talk a little bit about how heaven is paradise, but that's not the primary definition of heaven. And in fact, the primary definition of heaven really isn't a place. Heaven is not primarily a place. It will be a place. It is a place because human beings have a physical body, and physical bodies require a place. The Virgin Mary is in heaven, bodily, and therefore there is a place for her. But that is not primarily the definition of what heaven is. So what is heaven? Heaven is primarily a relationship. And it is first a relationship with God. So the very definition of heaven is an eternal relationship with God. Secondarily, but not separate from it, is also a relationship with God's family, with each other. We learn from Jesus, who actually quotes this out of the Old Testament. So this is the Jewish understanding as well as the Christian understanding. The two greatest commandments are to love God with your whole mind, heart, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's really what defines heaven for us. So when we talk about heaven being a relationship with God, to the extent that we have a relationship with God here on earth, we therefore participate in heaven. So the saints often talk about the Mass as a taste of heaven, because we are united to Christ through the Eucharist. And the whole family of God, including the saints and the angels, are present at every Mass. So there is a sense that we can experience heaven on earth as much as we have a relationship with God. But in heaven, that relationship would be something completely different than what we experience here. It's going to be an intimate, immediate, constant, ongoing soul-to-soul contact with God. So the intimacy with God, the life that we share with God, is going to be so much more than we can possibly even have here on earth. And that relationship, that intimacy with God, is going to be the source of our joy. So if we talk about anything else of heaven being a paradise, that all takes second seat to this joy, the intimacy, the union with God. As I said, not only is heaven a relationship with God, but it's also a relationship with others. So in heaven, we will also experience a great intimacy with each other, a greater intimacy than we experience in any human relationship today. And that relationship that we have with each other in heaven will be without sin, without any barrier, without ignorance, and we will have true intimacy and union with each other as members of God's family. Now, there are other elements of heaven that do plug into those ideas of heaven as paradise and heaven as a good place. Because we will have body and spirit, we will experience in heaven the perfection of our body and our spirit, the perfection of human life. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of us guys are going to be muscle men like this. And it doesn't mean that every woman is going to be a movie star or a model, because those are really earthly standards of what perfection means. So despite my image here on the slide, that's really not what we're talking about. What we're really talking about is that the body and the spirit will be perfectly what God created them to be. Our bodies will be a perfect expression of who we are. So we'll look at each other, and through our bodies, we will see each other. We will see each other's personality and know each other better just by looking at each other. So the other part of this human perfection is that there will not be a separation between our body and our spirit. Right now, because of sin, our bodies and our spirits are separated. They don't work well together. And that's why we can have physical desires that are bad for us spiritually. In heaven, all that goes away. We don't have that problem. We have a perfect union between our body and our spirit. We also have a sense of paradise in that we will be sharing in the attributes of God. And two of the great attributes of God that we will have in heaven are his beauty, that God is beauty and goodness, and that he is truth. So heaven will be a never-ending exploration of beauty and truth. And in that sense, it'll be paradise. But notice how in this case, that paradise is directly connected again to our relationship with God. And finally, because we will have a body, the original purpose of creation will be realized in heaven. God created every good thing in this world to be an expression of his love for us. So, you know, if you think about it, God didn't need to make food taste good, for example. But he makes food taste good because he wants food to be a reminder of his love for us. So in heaven, these goods will be present in some way. Now, probably not exactly as they are on earth, but they will be present in some way. We will have physical reminders of God's love for us, just as God intended all of creation to be. One question that's very popular today is, will my dog be in heaven, or will my cat be in heaven? There's actually a book that says something like, will I see my dog in heaven, I think the title is. And the answer is sort of, yeah. The good of animal companionship will be in heaven. Could God recreate your dog, specifically that one dog for you? Possibly. You know, but dogs don't have an immortal soul as humans do. So, but the good of animal companionship will certainly be part of heaven, as in some form, because that's how God intended us to relate to animals in the first place. So, why do we have such a hard time with experiencing heaven, knowing what heaven is, getting to heaven? Why is this even a question for us? Well, obviously it's a question for us because we have original sin. Original sin estranged us from God. It made us, rather than giving us its intimacy with God, it made us strangers to God. Now, God never abandoned us. It's much more that we abandon him. One thing that I love, a parallel that I love to make, is original sin with the story that Jesus tells of the prodigal son. That when humanity sinned, when Adam and Eve sinned on our behalf, really what Adam and Eve were doing was choosing the inheritance over the relationship, just like the prodigal son did. The prodigal son wanted to leave the family, leave the father, and enjoy his inheritance. And that's what we want to do. We want to put our relationship with God on a back burner, and we want to enjoy creation. We want to enjoy the physical things that that God gave us without the God that gave them to us. Even when we realize that this is the wrong way to go, and like the prodigal son, we say, I need to go back to my father. Sin and ignorance in our own lives makes that difficult. We don't know God as we should, and we become attached to the good things that he made in this world, too attached to go back to him and be willing to give them up. So Jesus comes to give us grace, and grace is what makes it possible for us to have a relationship with him. And the relationship that we have with God through grace is even greater than what Adam and Eve had in the beginning of creation. Because we, through grace, become united to Jesus. We become members of his body. And he is a member of the Holy Trinity. So as we become members of Jesus, we also participate in the very life of the Holy Trinity. And that participation in the life of the Holy Trinity is what heaven is all about. So what does it mean then that we do good? Does doing good mean nothing to us as Catholics? Well, it means a lot. It's just not enough in and of itself. Catholics see doing good acts, as a response to grace and a cooperation with grace. The first thing that happens for us is grace, putting us in a relationship with God. How do we respond to that grace? By trying to be more like Jesus, by trying to become people of love, by trying to live in the family of God. And we find that difficult because of sin and ignorance. So we have to rely on Jesus' grace more and more and undergo the process called conversion. Now, conversion is really going to be key to the keys to spiritual growth, to from the Abbey to my inner Abbey. Everything we're doing here is going to be based on conversion. So it's really important to understand this. Conversion is not primarily about doing good. It's about becoming good. Conversion is really about who we become rather than what we do. And the goal of conversion, the goal of the entire spiritual life, is to become a being of love, to love God with our whole heart, to love our neighbor. And that's really where doing good comes in. Doing good is an expression of our love for God and our love for others. Now, what about non-Christians? What about people who don't have this relationship with God, who don't have grace? Well, it is true that you don't need God to do good, in a sense, because we all have good in us. We are all made in God's image. And because we're made in God's image, we are made for good. Now, as fallen human beings, we find good more difficult, but we're still made for it. And we can still do good and be good to an extent without grace. But this natural goodness in us is not enough to get us to heaven. Because again, heaven is not a reward for doing good. It's a relationship with God. So we need this relationship with God in order for us to get to heaven. Now, that said, none of us on earth can judge the state of an individual's soul, with the one exception of the church being able to declare that people are in heaven, that they're saints. But with that exception, we can't judge that. Could God save non-Christians? Absolutely, he could. His grace is big enough that he could save people who don't have a relationship with him by giving them a relationship with him. But those people are not going to be saved because they didn't believe in Jesus. Those people are going to be saved in the end because of Jesus, if they are saved. Okay, I mean, we can't say one way or the other if they're going to be saved or not. What we can say for sure is it is God's desire for all of us to have a relationship with Jesus. And through that relationship to have grace, to become people of love, to be in relationship with the Holy Trinity and members of God's family. That's what happiness is in this world as well as in the next. Okay, so it's not impossible for non-Christians to get to heaven, but it will not be because of their own goodness. It will not be because of any religious beliefs that they have, except that it might be something God counts as these people honestly sought me and didn't know me through no fault of their own, so I will give them my grace and introduce myself to them. Okay, so that's what we believe about non-Christians. But we always want to focus ourselves and others on a relationship with Jesus in this world. All right, so I'm going to pause here before we move on and just ask for comments, questions. Go ahead and put those in the chat if you would, and we can chat about this a little bit. If you have any follow-ups, Mia, if you're on and would like to ask questions and follow up, that would be great, or anybody else as well. And again, I'll just pause and wait for that to catch up because there is a delay with the Google Hangouts. And if anybody is finding this a little bit elementary, that's fine. When we talk about from the Abbey and my inner Abbey, when we get into this, we'll be really covering the gambit. We'll be going. We can talk about anything really of the basics, all the way through very, very advanced stuff. It really depends on you. It depends what kind of questions you ask, what kind of feedback you give me. If you're finding this too basic, or if you're finding it too theological, just let me know that, and we'll adjust as we go. I want this to be useful to you, so want to be sure to let you know that. And if there are no questions, if you just want to put in there if this was helpful for you at all, yes or no, that would be helpful for me to find out. Okay, we're going to move on to the next section then. And this section is in the part of the Abbey that we call the bookstore. Now, this is not necessarily going to be, I'm not going to try to sell you stuff here. My purpose is to give you resources, introduce you to resources that I think that you'll find interesting and valuable. And the first resource that I want to share with you is the book called, one second here. It's a book called The Citadel of God, and this is a fiction book by Louis de Wohl. And actually, I'm going to one second, if I can get the technology to work. I'm going to take you out to my website. So, okay, now I said I don't have that I'm not necessarily going to make this a sales pitch, but I do have these resources for sale, and if you buy them from the Abbey, that really helps us to keep things like this going. So, if you're enjoying this webcast and you want to make sure that this continues, if you want these resources, and if you would buy them from me rather than like going to Amazon, where you can probably get them for cheaper, but if you buy them from me, that really helps to support this project, because it does cost money to have the studio and all of the bandwidth and all that kind of stuff. So do keep that in mind. And I will eventually have things for you to buy. I'm creating some courses. Some of them will be free, some of them will be for purchase, so just to let you know that. But here's the Citadel of God. If you go to mycatholicbooksandmedia.com and you just search for Citadel, C-I-T-A-D-E-L. That's the easiest way to find that. This book is a wonderful piece of fiction. I know not all Catholic fiction is on the on par with a lot of secular fiction, a lot of non-Christian fiction, but Louis de Wohl really is a masterful author. I notice on the website here I have Robert DeWoll up here. I have to change that. Louis DeWoll is the author. But this book is really worth the read for the entertainment value as well as for the spiritual elevation that it gives you. This is a story of Saint Benedict. And in this story, Saint Benedict, it goes from before he begins his journey toward holiness and toward monasticism, all the way through the foundation of his abbey, the most famous one. I know he had a couple of false starts, but he builds this abbey in the mountains. And in the book, as well as in history, this abbey becomes kind of an oasis for people. And it's interesting in the book to see how the different characters, there are all kinds of subplots with the Romans and with a man named Boethius, who we'll talk about in a minute. But all of these characters seek out the abbey as a place of calm, as a place of peace. And of course, they encounter God there to one degree or another. And even the most corrupt Roman officials go to the abbey at one point and experience this. Now, what is interesting to me in this book is the parallel story of Boethius. Boethius is a real character, historical character, and Boethius had a life that was charmed. He was a Catholic, but he was very well liked by the Romans. He had a very powerful, influential station in life. He was very, very popular. He would throw social events at his house, and all of the highest people would come. And then when they were there, of course, most of them were pagan Romans. He would debate with them in friendly debates and introduce them to the gospel. He was very well versed in philosophy and theology, and very good at arguing in favor of Catholic belief, but in a way that never got anybody's ire up, in a way that intrigued people. Unfortunately, Boethius is betrayed by one of his so-called friends, who falsely claims that he's plotting against the Roman provincial governor. And he's thrown into prison, and he loses everything. He loses his property, his wealth, his influence, his power, even his friends, and he's estranged from his wife and his daughters. He loses literally everything overnight. And in his history, this is where Boethius does some of his greatest writings. But in the novel, it goes a little more into his internal dialogue. And what Boethius does is he creates for himself an inner abbey. Like St. Benedict's Abbey in the mountains, Boethius creates within himself this place of peace and rest that is founded on a relationship with God. And that center gives him the strength to face his life, the strength to face his eventual martyrdom and his death. So the story of Boethius in this novel is as powerful as the story of St. Benedict. And the reason I'm recommending this as the first resource is that this is really what we need to do. You know, I'm a person who has a master's degree in theology. I taught theology for a very long time. I continue to teach it to adults for the diocese and for parishes, and yet I struggle to live the faith day to day. And I struggle not just because of sin, but more so for me because of distraction. And that distraction in my life that comes from busyness and the entertainment, and for me, video games and Netflix, those things that so easily sap away our energy, so that we don't have time to focus on God. That's what I need to shut out in my inner abbey. I need to build that inner abbey and create a place in my heart where I can deliberately focus on God. And that's what I really want to give you this resource as a great example of that. So again, I'm going to pause here before we move to the last section today for any questions or comments, especially if anyone's read this book or is familiar with Louis DeWoll's other works. If you want to comment on that, that would be great. I'm going to put this the URL for the bookstore up here one more time in case you want to go and grab that book. Again, just search for Citadel and that comes up. And you can also get to the bookstore by going to fromtheabbey.com and clicking on the bookstore link. Fromtheabbey.com is our main website. And just to let you know, I do see the comments that you guys are making on the chat. There are only a few of you making comments, but that's okay. Today I'm just kind of feeling out the delay. It is quite a large delay. So for us to dialogue, I'm going to have to figure something out. Maybe I'll have to play music or something and put the question up on the screen and just wait it out. You know, or I don't know, we'll figure something out with that. If you have any feedback on that, let me know. But there is quite a delay between the time I ask the questions and the time that I see your responses. You know, I'm sure part of that delay is for you to think about what to type, but I think a lot of it is the technology too. So I'm going to move forward here, and I'll probably move forward before I get the responses to my question about the book, and that's okay. So we'll figure that out as we move on. All right. So our last segment is the classroom. Now this is the part of the webcast where I'm going to choose one or two rooms to talk about. Usually the answer to the question won't be quite so developed because I developed this one more because that was really the main lesson I wanted to teach you, to really set the standard that everything we do in my Inner Abbey webcast is going to be focused on relationship with Jesus. To deepen our relationship with Jesus. And so usually this will be the main section of our instruction, where I'll choose one or two rooms and give you some practical strategies. Today, instead of practical strategies, I'm going to continue introducing you to the webcast. First of all, I just want to thank you for sticking with me so far. It doesn't look like anybody's dropped off yet on the live event. That's great. The future episodes are going to be a lot more strategic, and of course I'll get better at this as I go. I'm trying to run the webcast as I talk here, and you know, figuring out which buttons to push when is kind of part of this learning process. What I want to do in the classroom today is, like the first day of any class, I want to go through the syllabus. Don't worry, this won't be as boring as the syllabi that you had in college or in high school, but I do want to set out our expectations for the course, tell you what we're going to be covering, and you know, what your role will be and how you can participate more fully. So, like Boethius, as I said, we all need to build an inner abbey, a place of strength and peace, where we can meet Jesus amidst the chaos of life, for you know, the distractions, and also to really focus on Jesus so that we can conquer the sin in our life. Now, this is not a new idea. In fact, St. Teresa of Avila has a very, very classic, excellent work called The Interior Castle. And in The Interior Castle, St. Teresa of Avila talks about the journey that we make from the outside of the castle, which is metaphorical for our soul, to the center of the castle where we meet Jesus. So she uses this idea of an interior castle, a castle of the heart, but she's talking about a journey from the outside to the in. That's very close to what we're doing here. And I got this idea partly from St. Teresa of Avila, partly from the Citadel of God, and St. Benedict's idea of the Abbey, Boethius's example of the inner Abbey, the interior Abbey. But our metaphor is not going to be about journeying from the outside to the inside. Our metaphor is going to be about, first of all, unlocking the doors to each of the rooms of our inner Abbey that have been long neglected, and then second of all, cleaning and rebuilding and getting those rooms to be a fitting place to meet Jesus. Now again, I am creating courses to sell that will walk you through a strategic process, step by step, for each of the rooms of the Abbey. And those courses will have a beginner's level, and those beginner's level are going to be called the Keys to Spiritual Growth. So in that series of courses, we'll go through each of 5 rooms of the Abbey, and again, those stand for 5 areas of spirituality that we want to nurture. And we're going to talk about laying the foundation, just finding the keys to each room to open it up, just taking that first step. And again, these will be very practical, very strategic courses, but also very much for the beginner. And I don't mean beginner as in people who don't know a lot. I mean the beginner of those who really see the need to get rid of the chaos in their lives and focus more on Jesus and build a relationship. I'm a beginner, okay? And I know I have a lot of theology in my head, but I'm just beginning the journey of really taking my faith seriously and focusing on this interior life. Okay, that's the kind of person that would be perfect for this course. The keys to spiritual growth. The advanced level is going to be, again, 5 courses, I should say, on the same rooms, but now we're going to take things deeper and really dig into what the spiritual masters tell us about living the spiritual life in each of those areas of life. Okay, so we'll take a look at, for example, the chapel would be the area of prayer. For keys, for the keys of spiritual growth, the chapel is just going to be getting into the habit of prayer, praying every day. Now, I'm not there yet. I've been working on it for a while, and I'm getting better. And I'm really picking up a lot of great strategies through my own experience, but also through study that I can share with you and help you kind of cut out a lot of the fumbles that I'm doing in trying to get that habit of prayer. Once we have a habit of prayer in place, at the beginner level, the keys to spiritual growth, then we can start to rebuild the room. And that will mean really digging deeply into what the great spiritual masters of the Catholic Church say about prayer. So we'll talk about St. Teresa of Avila, St. Francis de Sales, St. Thomas Aquinas, St. John of the Cross, and learn from them what it means to really deepen our prayer life. That's the advanced course. Now, I want to let you know that those courses are coming eventually as I continue work here. But the My Inner Abbey webcast is really the beginning of this whole program, and the My Inner Abbey webcast is going to be really more of a broad spectrum, and we can cover any of the questions or the strategies that we would cover in the courses. We just won't go as deeply, but we can go much more broadly. So this is a place where you can free-flowingly ask questions, tell me where you are in your spiritual walk and what needs you have, and I will give you instruction in the My Inner Abbey webcast to meet your needs. So the webcast is wide, where the courses are deep, okay? But also the webcast, I want this to be an open dialogue. And I don't want it to just be a dialogue during the broadcast, but an ongoing dialogue. And that's why I invite you to become a member of one of the social sites that are going to be associated with this. So here are the ways that you can really participate in this project, in My Inner Abbey. First of all, ask questions about spiritual growth. So I want to entertain as many questions as possible. I have a good set already from the first time I asked on Facebook, but I really want to hear your questions. Since you're the audience, I want to hear what you want to learn about. Please do keep the questions focused on spiritual growth. There are a lot of great places where we can talk about why Catholics believe what we believe. There are places on the internet where you can go to argue with Catholics about, if you're not Catholic, about why you think that Catholicism is wrong. This is not the place for those things, okay? This is the place to focus on our relationship with Jesus. And whether you're Catholic or not, you're welcome to be here. You're welcome to participate and ask those questions about where you are in your relationship with Jesus and where we need to, where you need to be, what you need to learn to get to where you need to be. Continue to talk in the chat when I ask questions in the chat, when I ask for feedback. I'd really like to see the chat light up with your answers and your responses. Again, we'll have to figure out the time lag thing and work that out. But I really would like to have kind of a dialogue going in the chat if we can during the live event. Give me feedback. You can give me feedback by email or at the social sites. How do you find the show? How do you find the program? Is it interesting? Too long? Too short? Is the time good for you? Anything. Give me feedback. You can then, most importantly, go to facebook.com/from the Abbey, or go to the Google Hangout community and search for My Inner Abbey. And you can, again, either be a member of either one of those or both. And I'm going to post questions up there about spiritual growth, sometimes related to the topic of the webcast, sometimes related to other things that I'm doing in From the Abbey. And I invite you to participate in that dialogue. That's going to be very educational, not for me, but for you as well. So hopefully it'll be educational for me too. But I really want that to be something that you find of value as well. So the Google community is you can find it publicly, but it is a by permission only community. So just ask for permission and I'll let you in if your name is on the list. And if you're listening to this, obviously your name's probably on the list. Even if your name's on the list and you want it to be, let me know. And facebook.com/from the Abbey is wide open. So just go there to that web address. And I will be sending out by email the questions. So when I post something, I'll let you know by email. So the first thing I'd like you to do, if you would, is go to facebook.com/from the Abbey and like the page if you haven't done that already, and or go to the Google community and ask for membership. And then we can get the ball rolling on continuing the dialogue in between each episode. Once again, I'm going to pause and ask to see if there are any questions or comments in the chat. And then we're going to close up. And those of you who do know me very well will be very surprised to find out that I'm going to close on time. I'm usually not somebody who does things on time. I'm really going to work on doing that and keep these an hour long or shorter to make sure I respect your time. It's a standing joke with friends of mine, though. I'm not very good at keeping track of time. So any questions or feedback on the chat before we close off for today? And I will be sending you emails. So if you haven't yet registered for receiving those emails, if you go to my-inner-abbey.com, and those are dashes, not the underlined space. So my-inner-abbey.com, and be sure that you get on that email list if you're not already. I know sometimes people can find Hangouts on Google+, and so you might be joining us that way, or on YouTube, and that's great. Welcome if you are. But if you go to that website, my-inner-abbey.com, and sign up to get the emails, you'll know, first of all, when the next broadcast is going to be, because hopefully it'll be next Tuesday at 8, but that really depends on family scheduling and all kinds of different factors. So I'll let you know that each Friday when the next webcast is going to be. You'll also find out when I post questions in the social media sites, Google Plus or Facebook. You'll also find out anything else that would be pertaining to My Inner Abbey. Rebroadcast, that's the one I had in my mind. So when and where I'll post the rebroadcast of the entire evening together, the whole hour, and also the individual segments that I'm going to kind of cut up and put as shorter videos and shorter audio pieces in different places on the internet. And you'll get all of that by email if you sign up at my-inner-abbey.com. Okay, so to close things off, what I would like to do is just to let you know that tonight's event was sponsored by the Keys to Spiritual Growth. Now, this isn't external sponsor. This is simply the program that I'm creating at From the Abbey. And the Keys to Spiritual Growth is actually a free introductory online course that I'm creating. And this is something I've been promising for a very long time. So if you've been following me for a period of time, you've heard me mention this time and time again. And there's been a lot of a huge learning curve, first of all, in video production and getting the audio right and the lighting and all that. And I'm past that now. So I'm actually creating videos pretty regularly. And this is something that is coming down the line, this free course, Keys to Spiritual Growth. And to get to that course, if you just go to fromtheabbey.com, and again, I'm going to take you there really quickly here. A few more button pushes to do that than usual. Here we go. So just go to fromtheabbey.com, and whoa, that's not what I wanted. Wait a second. That's freaky. Try that again. That should be the one. Okay, and if you go over to the sometimes there's a little pop-up that comes over here in the margin you can sign up to. You can also sign down here and just click on that button, and the sign-up form will show up for you. That's actually a video. We'll get rid of that for now. There we go. Okay, so all three of these, you got one in the sidebar. Sometimes one comes off to the side here, and there's a place down here to click, and you can register. All three of those are for the same thing. There's all three for the same course. So you can sign up for that free course anywhere in there. Right now it's an early bird list, but the course is mostly shot. The videos are all shot. I'm in post-production on most of them. There are a couple that I want to reshoot just because things have changed a little bit in what I wanted to teach. But that course is going to be well worth it. It'll be a free course, an introduction to the From the Abbey project. So that's our sponsor for today. Thank you very much for attending the webcast, whether you're here live or listening to the rebroadcast, the podcast, or the YouTube video, or reading the transcript. However you're here, thank you for being part of My Inner Abbey. This will be a fun experiment, and I hope that I get a lot of feedback from you so that it actually is formed around your needs. That's really my goal. So God bless. Until next time, this is Jeff Arrowhead. I'm founder of the Catholic Educational Apostle from the Abbey, encouraging you to continue to rediscover the joy of learning and living your faith.